We're doing a spoiler-free review of the new movie, The Imitation Game, followed by a full discussion afterwards. Okay, so this week on Low Earth Orbit, we're reviewing the new movie, The Imitation Game. And this is a World War II movie about the efforts of the British military and military intelligence to break the Nazi Enigma code during World War II, and is about Alan Turing's involvement with that. Alan Turing being known for being one of like the early computer scientist pioneers, like basically the inventor of the digital computer. This stars Benedict Cumberbatch as Alan Turing, also stars Keira Knightley, and was directed by Morton Tildum. So we have plenty of like unpronounceable names, as is tradition on Low Earth Orbit.
We actually use it as criteria. It's
yeah, exactly. Yeah. We only go to the movies where it's going to be hard to pronounce at least one person's name. Alfonso Cuarón. So we just got back from the movies a little while ago. So I guess let's just jump straight into impressions. Scott, what'd you think?
I was pretty blown away. I was really surprised. I thought this was going to be one of those movies where I sort of academically appreciated it for the historical aspects. But it didn't, from the trailer, I didn't really get a feeling like it was going to be emotional. And it was really emotional. And it was beautifully shot. The acting was fantastic. The score was amazing, I thought. And I really got pulled in a way I wasn't expecting. It was a great movie. My only complaint is I didn't love the ending. But, that didn't ruin the movie for me. It was spectacular, and I would highly recommend everybody see it.
Cool. Steve?
I enjoyed the movie as well. Benedict Cumberbatch's portrayal of Alan Turing wasn't what I was expecting. It was much more like Sherlock Holmesy. It was appropriately. It wasn't exactly his Sherlock Holmes persona, but it was much closer. Like it wasn't really how I'd imagine Alan Turing from like other historical accounts I've read of him. But it's still a great performance, and I think it really worked well given the kind of story they were trying to tell, and at least the aspects of his personality that they were trying to play up here in this film. And the acting was really great. I love that they actually pulled out a lot of like the elements of that I love the most about that whole story. And I don't want to say too much during this, because if you haven't seen the movie, it could be spoilers, but there's a lot of just like really delightful aspects to how they actually broke the Enigma code, and then what they and then the period afterwards and how they use that information for the war efforts that I wasn't aware of until relatively recently. And I read a book about it, and I was kind of just sort of blown away. And then they actually like bring a lot of stuff up in the film, and I think it's really the ramifications of that are incredibly fascinating, and we can talk about them after the spoiler break. Also love the score. Andre Desplat, who scored it, is like quickly becoming one of my favorite composers. He did the Moonrise Kingdom soundtrack as well, which I love, and also the Grand Budapest Hotel score. And I love the one for this. I'm probably going to go download it on iTunes after this. That was really great. I mean, there were some rough spots. There's like a team of misfits aspect to the middle of the film that like felt a little cliche and a little bit rushed. I wasn't crazy about that. There were some rough spots in the script where there's a lot of like kind of overly on the nose exposition that happens. Which is I think it could have been a little bit more subtle.
The flashback kind of.
Yeah, that was again a little on the nose. I agree. The ending, I felt it felt a little bit forced. So that wasn't great. But we can talk about that more again after spoilers. But overall, I thought it was great. It was beautifully shot, beautifully scored. Again, more emotionally stirring than I expected it would be. And also just kind of fun. There was a lot of humor sprinkled throughout it, which I wasn't expecting. Yeah. So thumbs up.
Cool. Yeah, I feel the same way. I thought it was great. I feel like, I don't know, we're all like computer people, so I think we all kind of have like a passing understanding of like kind of the story about like Alan Turing and like breaking down the codes and stuff. But it was cool to see it like, done in this way. And for something as like pretty academic as code breaking and cryptography, I think it managed to be like really engaging and not like too dry or like too technical. I don't think they dumbed it down too much. I don't know. I mean, like
I was impressed by that too. Yeah, it didn't seem like they were trying to like say words that kind of made it sound magical. They just sort of didn't go there.
There was like little to no techno babble, which was good. I mean, I think there was a tiny bit, like there was one scene where Turing is kind of like explaining his vision for like the universal machine or whatever, or Keira Knightley's character is sort of talking about that. And there's a little bit where they kind of have to sort of explain like, we're inventing the computer, like, but it's like,
and they sort of almost imply that this machine will be able to think.
Yeah, it's
in a way that felt like, would Alan Turing really explain it that way? Like, I think he knew better.
Yeah,
but
So anyway, so there was a little bit of that, and there's just that kind of stuff. I was like, there's just a tiny, slightly little cheese factor at some of those spots, and like the flashback stuff has got a little bit of that too, and so it's like, so some of that detracted from it a bit, and there's this like little side plot that I think is a bit spoilerish that I think should have just been like nixed from the whole movie.
And the flashbacks with the younger actor, he was not of the caliber of Benedict Cumberbatch. I mean,
really?
It is very hard.
I strongly disagree with that. I was blown away by it struck me how much he had picked up Benedict Cumberbatch's rendition of Turing.
It seemed like he was trying to do it, but it felt like he was trying and not quite succeeding.
Well, I guess so. I may have been sort of grading on a curve given his age. He was clearly, I think, probably 12 or 13 or something like that, and it's really, really hard to find an actor that's good at that age.
Oh, absolutely, I totally agree.
So I was surprised that they attempted it at all. They could have just pitched it as, sorry, it's a kid. We're not gonna. But he like even some of the like the verbal tics and stuff, they at least made an attempt to do that. I was pretty impressed by that. So I think I had the opposite reaction. I liked it.
Yeah.
Overall, I think it was good. I'd recommend it.
Yeah, there's definitely some spoiler things I want to talk about. So.
Yeah.
Spoilers: the Allies win the war. In case you didn't know. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, Scott, I think you said that we had some viewer feedback / mailbag stuff that we wanted to talk about.
Yep.
Okay, so we had some mail from listeners and some feedback, YouTube comments and stuff that we wanted to give a shout out to. On our episode about Cabin Pressure, which is the BBC radio show, also starring Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah.
John Light wrote in and says that he recommends another older Radio 4 sitcom called Old Harry's Game, and he says it's the only one that's on par with Cabin Pressure. So, I don't know. I haven't listened to Old Harry's Game, but I'm always interested to hear more about it. So,
I love the title.
Yeah, sounds great already.
Sold.
Yeah. So, thanks, John, for the recommendation.
Thank you. So we heard from Jeff Ruberg, who he was just asking, this is a very technical thing, I guess, but we used to use Blue Yeti microphones, and he noticed, I guess, because he has a podcast as well for Digimon, is that we switched the ATR 2100s, these guys, and we love them. So if you're thinking about starting a podcast, highly recommended. I think they're like $60, and the quality you get out of them is like $200 worth of quality. So very impressed.
They look great.
Yeah.
Just want to cycle back to some YouTube comments related to Interstellar, which we reviewed a couple of episodes ago. Reader Eric had a number of great points that he wrote in about. He said he liked the movie overall, but there were a few head scratchers that really bothered him. And I'll mention a couple that I wish I would have complained about. which brings me to comments from another YouTube commenter, which is a friend of the show, Dave DeSandro, who,
Yeah. By the way, spoilers for Interstellar for another movie.
But thanks Eric and Dave for writing in with the feedback. It was great, and those are really excellent points.
Okay, so I think we have some spoiler things we want to talk about for the Imitation Game. So we're going to cut to our spoilers segment. But before we do, for those of you who don't want to listen to spoilers, we'll give you all our contact info. So you can find us online at lowerearthorbit.fm, where we have links to all of our previous episodes, and you can find all the show notes about all the stuff we talk about. We publish links to all those things. You can also find our RSS feeds there. You can subscribe to the show. The RSS feed, we had some feedback too about like how to subscribe to the show. So if you go to iTunes, you can get the audio and the video episodes. But if you only want one or the other, we put all our videos on YouTube. You can find us at youtube.com/lowerearthshow. And we also have a video-only RSS feed. And we also have an audio-only RSS feed. So if you only want audio episodes, which some people do, you can find that on our website too. So just go to lowerearthorbit.fm and everything's there.
We have a less popular feed where we only publish every other episode.
Only episodes that mention the Dark Tower. So all of them. Exactly. Scratch it off your bingo card now. And you can also find us on Twitter at Lower Show.
I think that's everything.
I think that covers everything.
Email, I guess.
Email us at feedback@lowerearthorbit.fm. That's all. I think we've covered absolutely
got it
everything.
all.
There's no other. That's all of it. Okay. So, on to spoilers.
Okay.
Okay, so spoiler stuff for the Imitation Game.
The one thing I was going to mention that maybe actually isn't even a spoiler, maybe we should mention before, is the movie had sort of the, I don't know if you'd call it an unconventional structure, but it wasn't a completely linear structure.
Yeah.
So there were like kind of concurrent, like different, there were I think 3 different time periods, right?
Yeah.
I dug that. I thought that was cool. It added a level of sort of complexity that I enjoyed. And I enjoyed the contrast, or I guess not even contrast, like the bookends of here's this experience he's going through now. Here's a little bit of backstory as to how that happened. I think, Steve, you kind of hinted that you felt it was too on the nose. Some of those things about like, well, why does he understand why violence is sort of fun or whatever?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, it wasn't. I mean, many films do a much worse job. It was all right. I feel like it was exposition of like explaining what computers were and the war and the importance of Enigma to the war. That felt more, I don't know, clunky exposition than in terms of other than the backstory.
The other thing in terms of the ending, like if they had stopped pretty much at the end of the second act, I think I would have a much higher opinion of the movie. And it wasn't, I mean, part of it is kind of like, the end of the second act is really uplifting. And that moment where he has that realization of like, this is how we can make it work. Like that was awesome. I love that moment, that in the way they delivered it and everything, the filmmaking aspects of that right there were fantastic. And then it kind of fizzles out at the end a little bit. Like, I think they're trying to be, they're trying to finish the actual real world story and kind of explain how it happened, but there just wasn't anything there. It was a little bit kind of on the depressing side, and also I didn't really feel like I was getting new information. So that was kind of a downer. But I mean, it didn't ruin the movie. It's still an excellent movie, but I just kind of wish they had something at the end other than just, and then he was sort of sad and then he committed suicide.
Yeah.
That wasn't great.
Yeah, so. It's hard because I mean, they could leave that out entirely, but then they get flack for not
really
including it, and they're like
really
playing down his homosexuality by not including his ending, his sort of tragic demise at the hands of the British government. So I think it was kind of a hard place to be there. I think that I disliked more about the ending was the way they tried to like shoehorn in the Turing test as the framing device for the entire film. And props to trying to do it. I think most people don't even realize they're doing it, and most people don't even care that the Turing test is in there. But I mean, that was what they were trying to do there, and it just felt like kind of forced and weird. Like, would he really just give, basically like divulge all of this super classified information to some random police dude?
Yeah.
as
part of like a pseudo Turing testy exercise? It just seems unbelievable.
Yeah.
By the way, I mean, this is maybe me reading too much into it, but that interaction that he had with the police officer or the detective, I guess, and the nature of the conversation, I get like a total Blade Runner vibe from that. Like, oh yeah. Like at the opening scene of Blade Runner where they have that, they have the test thing, and it's exactly that test, right? Are you a machine or not?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe that was just me seeing something that wasn't there, but that kind of struck me.
I don't know.
I didn't know anything to add to that. I was just curious if you guys had thought if that occurred to you.
I guess I didn't get that vibe,
okay.
But yeah. I can see what you mean though. Yeah, there was sort of like this tangent with one of the characters is actually a Soviet spy. And I feel
like that's the one thing that's, I think, deviated most from the actual historical record.
Yeah, and I feel like actually didn't add much. Like, I feel like, so I'm trying to think of like all the moments that plot point even entered into the movie. So there's the one point where they're like, they think it might be Turing, so they like rummage through his desk, and then the admiral or whoever it is like yells at him and is like, I don't like you. And then, okay, so now we've established how much he really doesn't like him. Okay, so there's that. And then what else happens? I guess like he figures out who it is, and then they sort of like are both blackmailing each other essentially, right? And that's like the only other time that it shows up. And then
there's at the end with his fiance,
right.
Like it seemed like they were trying to use that as a sort of a reason for him to break off the engagement. Like, oh, he's worried for her safety because maybe they'll use her as part of this Soviet spy.
But I don't think he believed that, right? Like he was using that as an excuse, I think, right?
Well, he didn't give that as an excuse to her.
Didn't he? I think
no.
No. Okay. Well, he said something.
He said that he didn't care about her and that he was using her to keep her on the project.
But at the beginning of that scene, he said, "You have to leave because I don't trust them," or something like that. That was how that's
maybe it was. So I think they were trying to allude that he personally was scared because they might try and pin the Soviet thing on her in case they had to pin it on somebody.
Yeah,
and they didn't want to pin it on the actual mole.
Yeah.
So, but he didn't want to tell her that, and so I think they were trying to give him an out so you would feel more sympathy to him.
I see.
In reality, he did break off the engagement.
Yeah.
And probably nobody really knows why.
Sure.
I mean, well, maybe just because he legitimately, didn't love her, or felt like he wouldn't satisfy her because whatever, But maybe they're trying to give him a sort of another reason to get out of it, and then he'd be more sympathetic as a character. I don't know. It felt very forced and artificial.
I mean, I don't know. It seems like the most utility that character has is to underscore how scared he was of his homosexuality coming out. Right? Like that was like he knows he's a Russian spy, and the only reason he's agreed to not say anything is because he knows he's going to get arrested or whatever. I thought, but that seems kind of like a weird, awkward way to go about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I just felt like they could have struck the whole Soviet thing from the plot, and I don't think we would have missed out on it.
I mean, it's a little bit of a twist because he was on his team, I guess. But
you cared so little about him overall.
Yes,
I'm sure he's
he's here.
He's a Russian spy. Fine, take him away. I don't care.
Whatever. Yeah. Take him out and shoot him. We don't. Who cares? He's just some guy.
I just want to repeat. I thought the cinematography was fantastic. I was really. It's the kind of movie where you don't necessarily even really need that, because the focus is really on the history of it. But it was such a understated approach to things. It wasn't really heavily. Maybe arguably too subtle in some cases, but it was really interesting. I don't know how to articulate it well, but
there was one cinematographic moment which was really stunning, but which made me it felt like maybe I don't know, too unrealistic. And it was this one scene where they're showing all these convoys, and then the camera pans down, goes under the water, and there are just ridiculous number of U-boats.
Oh yeah,
and they're all so close together.
Yeah,
it's did you really need 10 U-boats 200 meters apart from each other? Is that even safe for one thing?
Yeah.
Why do you need that many? It seemed bizarre. I mean, maybe that's how it happened, and I don't know, couldn't carry very many torpedoes. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a World War II expert. I'm sure. So if anyone in our our audience is, I'm sure, feel free to write and correct me. But that felt it was a really creepy, an effective scene, but it just seemed whoa, this seems nuts.
Yeah, yeah, a little bonkers.
Yeah. How many of them do we need? All of them. Yes. Within 1 square mile.
Yeah, it was a little shades of a gravity there,
Oh yeah.
There's a whole ocean, but we'll put everything right here, within 1 square.
Big, yeah.
They can swim between the submarines when one is disabled.
That's awesome.
Still burnt by that one.
I thought it was interesting. Right after they cracked the code, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, we've done it," and then they pretty quickly realized that actually we probably can't act on this.
That was interesting.
This is one of my favorite things about the whole Project Ultra thing that I love, which is that they, once they cracked the code, they couldn't just use it all the time. They had to be extremely careful, and they had to always have a cover story.
Right.
And so it's I read I was reading a book about it, and they went to a lot of really elaborate lengths to go and create basically these another reason to have to basically make discover troop movements and stuff. They would basically they would have some stray bomber just happen to go over the ship and just discover it, and so then they would just out of range, so the Germans could see that they were seen, but they couldn't shoot it down, and they would go away again. So they were that was just a random chance that happened to be a flight within visual distance, or they would
would they actually go fly a plane?
They would frequently. That was one of the more common things they did. They would just they would happen to change some flight path for some flight. So it just happened to go near enough that they could spot it.
Wow. So were the pilots in on it? Or
okay.
They
would.
So they'd say, okay. So it's not they're just turn to this heading, and the pilot's oh my God, there's Germans down there. Radio this back.
But anyway, I thought that was great that they included that. And there's we could talk about that for a long time. There's just tons of really cool stories about the various excuses they came up for how they discovered various Nazi troop movements and stuff. So
was the whole crossword puzzle as a recruitment tactic actually a real part of it?
I don't remember ever hearing anything about that.
Okay,
that may have been made up for or they could have been a detail that I had. I mean, the whole Joan Clark thing, he did get engaged to her, and she was part of that effort, but I don't ever remember her being as prominent in the other accounts I've read. But that could also just be historical bias as well, so I don't know. I mean, in one hand, they could have just increased her role because they needed someone to play off of him in this film. history books often trying to pick like, one character to, exemplify as well. And so maybe maybe she kind of got lost, in the sort of, there was a number of mathematicians all involved in this process, and Alan Turing was the lead, and he deserves all the credit he gets, but there were a bunch, and maybe she kind of got lost with the rest of the other mathematicians. The little footnote that they, the Heil Hitler, because it was repeated strings what they used, like that was true, and I love that too.
Yeah.
It feels like such like poetic justice.
Yeah, totally. I loved the MI6 agent. He was great.
Yeah.
I thought he was a really good character.
He's been a lot of stuff. He was in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. He was in Stardust, actually, strangely. I'm trying to think what else I've seen him in. He's consistently really good. Yeah, I really liked seeing him.
I love the line about how there were only like 5 divisions in military intelligence.
Right. That's the spirit.
I was kind of expecting a double cross from that character, but I was kind of pleasantly surprised that they didn't go down that route. I mean, I guess in a way it kind of was, because he knew about the spy, but it was weird. It's sort of like in a very playful way, like the whole thing about, oh no, she's just in the market. She's gonna be back in a minute.
That was really good.
Yeah.
Military prison.
Yes.
I like the scene too where they're like explaining to him over breakfast, like, and not at all a private restaurant at all.
Yeah.
There's like the three of them are like having breakfast in this restaurant, and they're trying to explain to him that they've cracked the enigma.
Yeah.
It's like, so a conspiracy about army intelligence at the highest levels of government, and he's gonna, that's right up my alley. That's my thing. That's what I do. Yeah, I guess that would be. Yeah.
I guess the only other detail that jumped out at me was that I didn't realize that it was classified for 50 years.
Oh yeah, that jumped out at me too. That's what's amazing.
Because I
about
feel like I'd always known about this. I mean, some degree, like some vague knowledge of Enigma and Project Ultra and stuff like that. But like 50 years. So then like it wasn't until like the 1990s that this actually came out. Like,
must be.
Yeah.
That's what I think is amazing with that kind of stuff. Like 50 years is a long time.
Yeah.
Like, and do you think? I mean, obviously people who worked on it knew, but like, did anyone know? Like, did the Germans ever figure out that, like, hey, it seems like people were cracking the enigma?
That is an interesting
Did they
question.
not know till the 90s either? Like, I don't know, it's crazy. And like, how much stuff is classified now that like it's gonna come out and you're just like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, we did what? They did what? The who to the what? Like, yeah, who knows? Because that's like,
they come out all the time. Like, gosh, what was this is terrible. The Ben Affleck starred and directed film a couple of years ago.
Argo.
Yeah. Another great example of like a recently declassified, like 1987, like an amazing, story from, not as far back from the 70s, but still.
Hollywood just sitting there waiting. Come on, declassify something.
Something good. Come on. We're dying here.
Well,
I think
it's a great movie.
Yeah.
I think
watch it.
Yeah. Okay.
Also stars Keira Knightley, directed by Morton Tildum. Another unpronounceable name.
It sounds like somebody else's reverse name. It's like an anagram of somebody else. Editing break. Can bring it up.
I wish we had like a little like stack of actual papers we could like pull out.
Just like pour it up on
That'd be awesome. We should have a mailbag, like Santa's mailbag. I really want to. We shouldn't because it's pointless, but I really want to mention the person that was on the Snowpiercer episode. It's like they're allowed to have whatever opinion they want.
It's really nice.
That is great.
And I love how you're the yellow shirt guy. It's like I wouldn't pick him to be my movie buddy, but
That's awesome.
did you read that? It was hilarious.
That was really
is that the
good.
one you put in the email?
Yeah, it was hilarious.
Sorry. Do you know what it is?
Ampersand?
Oh, they're ampersands, yes. But it's
Oh, one's Helvetica and one's Arial?
first person to actually get it.
We're inventing the computer.